Good morning. Today we're looking at Genesis 50 verse 20, which is the story of Joseph and how God uses something which was meant for bad, actually turning it into good. The story of Joseph is one of the most colorful stories in the Bible. I'm sure you've often heard it in Sunday school or earlier in your years here at St. Philip's. It's what today we would call a rags to riches story. It is very relatable and has even been turned into a musical called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now, in short, Joseph was the favorite of Jacob's 12 sons, and Jacob gave him this beautiful multicolored coat as a gift because he was the favorite son. This obviously meant that his brothers were very jealous of him, and in a fit of hate and jealousy, they sold him into slavery, and he was taken to Egypt as a slave. There he spent years in jail, but through remaining faithful to God, he became a very important and influential person, something like a prime minister of today. Through Joseph's interpretation of the Pharaoh's dreams, the Egyptians were warned of an oncoming famine and stockpiled large quantities of food. And during this famine, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to buy some food, and they were all reunited, saving the nation of Israel from oblivion. It was in a meeting with his brothers that Genesis 50 verses 19 to 21 played out, and the following was said. Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Now, keep in mind that the last time they spoke to Joseph before this was when, in a fit of hate and jealousy, they sold him as a slave. His brothers never expected to see him again and to have to answer for their terrible deed. What do we learn from this? By now you are well acquainted with our theme of the year being providence, and our theme verse of Romans 8:28, which says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." God shows his providence in a number of ways in this story. Firstly, how God worked for the good of Joseph. By our standards, Joseph's life really took a turn for the worse when he was sold into slavery. You really cannot imagine a more hopeless situation for a person to be in than to be a slave in a foreign country. When Joseph was sold into slavery, he did not become angry and turn his back on God. To make matters worse, he was innocently sent to jail. But Joseph's faith never wavered. He kept his faith alive, regularly praying and living a God-honoring life. When he got to the critical point of having to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams, he gave the honor and credit to God, and God helped him to tell Pharaoh what the future holds. Pharaoh then gave Joseph the credit for what he did and made him the most important person in his government. We can really admire Joseph for keeping the faith through both adversity and prosperity. Despite being a slave and being in jail, his faith never wavered, and he never got bitter towards God. He accepted God's plan for his life, and when he rose to being an important man and being very prosperous, he still remained faithful to God. Sometimes prosperity is a bigger danger to our faith than adversity, because in prosperity we can easily lose our spiritual dependence on God. We think that we can go through life without God. But despite prosperity, Joseph remained faithful and available so that God could use him. Secondly, how God worked for the good of Joseph's brothers and the people of Israel. God works in wonderful ways to bring relief from bad situations. It is very typical that God uses ordinary people like you and me to do extraordinary things. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary people is that the extraordinary people trust in God and are available and willing to be used by God. Throughout his time in jail, Joseph's faith never wavered despite the awful circumstances that he lived in. He kept believing and kept being available. When he received the opportunity to serve God, he grabbed the opportunity, and this meant that not only did his personal situation change, he also helped to save many other people. I think we can agree from our worldly perspective that we would have understood it if Joseph had thrown his brothers into jail when they came to Egypt, given what they have done to him. However, Joseph does not do that. Initially, he does not reveal his identity to his brothers. His brothers are totally taken aback when they learn his true identity and immediately think that he will punish them for their deeds of long ago. But he does not. Joseph understands the bigger picture of how God works and how that God sometimes plays what we would call a long game. God makes his plans to unfold a long way into the future, like in this situation. God knew that he was going to bring a famine over the world and that he would use Joseph in that role, not just to save the people of Israel, but the whole world. For this reason, Joseph says these words to his brothers. He has long ago forgiven his brothers and was just very happy to see them. So, if we consider the story of Joseph, we learn that God does work for the good of those who love him. We should remain faithful to God, be obedient and available to God, and also understand that sometimes it takes a long while for God's plans to unfold. My challenge to you today is to ask yourself, how have you been or how can you be available for God to use you in this life? God bless.